So what I want to do is I want to just talk briefly about this project that I've been working on, and I just want to show you guys it because it's free and you can go check it out. And then, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I want to talk to you guys about some code, and I want to dive in and kind of nerd out with this pattern that I've been using. I've been doing enterprise consulting for years, and I've kind of been moving from team to team like Mary Poppins, and I see a lot of things that teams are doing differently, and some are working very well and others are really struggling. And so this is something that I wrote for a client years ago, and then I used it for another client, and I kind of started extending it, and it's been really, really useful. And so I want to show that to you. But first, I'm just going to share my screen here and jump into these slides. And like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I want to show you the code, which I think is much cooler. Okay, can you see this?
We can, yes. Thanks, Bonnie.
All right. Okay, so my name is Bonnie Brennan. I'm an Angular GDE. I'm a regular panelist on Angular Air. I'm the founder of ngHouston, and also recently, now this year, I'm the founder of AngularNation.net, which is what I want to introduce to you. Okay, so this actually kind of started in 2017 because there was another GDE, Jeff Welpley, who had this domain and he was going to do something with it, and he got busy with another project. And so he asked if anybody wanted this domain in the GDE channel, and I thought it was really cool, Angular Nation, right? I thought it just sounded like a really cool domain. So I asked him for it. And I wanted to do something for the community because obviously it's Angular Nation, and I really love the Angular community, and I was traveling a lot, meeting a lot of people, and I just really like connecting people and introducing people to each other. And so I wanted to find a way where we could kind of all collaborate, right? Not so much for the experts, but like for everybody else, for all the rest of us who are actually using Angular Nation or Angular every day. So the problem is that I kind of got stuck here for, it was like I was sitting on this domain for like 3 years because I didn't know what to do with it, right? Like I wanted like, I imagined like a Stack Overflow / Reddit type of thing where we could ask questions and then upvote them, and maybe something with like a map where people could find each other. But I didn't want it to be like too specific because I didn't want it to be creepy or anything, but like maybe like to see how many other people are using Angular near you, or, you know, I was like going through all of these ideas in my head. But the problem is that every time I came up with an idea, I was like, oh, well, we already have this. We already have Slack. We already have Twitter. We already have, like, I didn't want to just make another social network, right? Because I just thought that was silly. So I talked myself out of a lot of things, and I never did anything with it, and it just sat there. But I kept renewing the domain because I really liked it. So then in 2019, I was having some back problems, and I came across Yoga with Adriene, which if you have any kind of neck or back pain or anything, or just if you're not working out enough, I highly recommend Yoga with Adriene. She has the most amazing YouTube channel, and she teaches really great free yoga. And I found her, and there was actually a TED Talk that she did, and I was wondering about Yoga with Adriene because she puts out really good professional content, and it's free. And I'm like, how does this woman make money, right? I was really trying to understand that and figure it out. And so I looked at this TED Talk she did that I highly recommend, and it was called Giving to Receive, and it kind of talked more, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that, but basically it was how she was giving away free content and how she was still bringing in revenue and how that whole business model worked. I really loved it. And through that, I found this platform actually that she's using called Mighty Networks. And so once I saw this platform, I was like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I've been kind of wanting for Angular Nation, because I just really love the interface and it was all ready to go. And so all I had to do was license the software, and then we launched it. So we were planning to launch it in late summer, and we actually ended up launching it really early because of coronavirus, because this is like a place where everybody, like Angular Nation, right? I wanted a place for the community to collaborate and meet each other. And when coronavirus happened and suddenly everybody was working from home, and like just there was so little communication in the community, that I really thought we needed it. So we launched it early. Before we get into that, I just want to touch on social media. I'm going to talk a little bit about, like, I'm going to show you what it looks like and everything, but before I get into that, I just want to talk for a second about social media, because there's some crazy stuff going on in 2020. So when I first started getting involved in the Angular community and I was speaking at conferences and traveling a lot, most of the speakers were using Twitter. So I followed all my favorite people, and this was actually really great because I had a really good Twitter feed that was almost entirely Angular. And this is really all I used it for. So it was perfect for me. And I was just keeping up with all the community stuff and events and CFPs and articles and things like that on Twitter. Then this has really been working great for me for years. However, we've seen warnings, right, about harmful patterns in social media, and we've got Instagram influencers and YouTube personalities and bots and trolls and political propaganda. And the algorithms that they use are intentionally divisive and harmful. And unfortunately, they're also very effective because we've got Trump and we've got Brexit, and y'all, like, let's not even go there, right? Because it's crazy. So I'm not going to talk about politics, and we're going to keep moving. But right, this is like crazy stuff that's been going on. And I'm sure probably a lot of you have heard about this too. The point that I want to make is that now more than ever, social media can be harmful to our mental health. And although I had carefully cultivated my Twitter feed to be all Angular all the time, that has completely gone off the rails this year. So you probably know I'm an American expat and I follow a lot of Americans. And so there's been a lot of frustration, and not even Americans really, it's everywhere, right? The politics and civil unrest and coronavirus. And this is super, super stressful stuff. And it's not that I don't want to see it. I do care. I care very much about this stuff. And like I heard a term called compassion fatigue, and it really kind of spoke to me because I feel that way. Like I feel very empathetic to people in the world, and I see all this suffering, and it just really affects me. So, and I don't want to stress you guys out, right? The point is that it used to be news, but now the news has like turned against us. And so, and actually, I just added this slide recently because there's a new documentary on Netflix that I just saw, and it's called this is a screenshot. It's called The Social Dilemma. And I really think that it has nothing to do with Angular, right? But I really think that everybody should see it because it was really eye-opening for me. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because I really think that you should watch, especially if you have teenagers or if you have anybody who's on a lot of social media, you've got to see this. Okay, so keep moving. We used to call it social networking, and somewhere it changed to social media, which is kind of completely different, right? Because the social networking was like all this online stuff that we were talking to our friends, but social media means that someone else has control over what we're looking at, and that infinite scroll, right? That's like kind of not great. So we've known for a while that social media is harmful, but we really still need a way to connect with other people. And with the coronavirus now, like this is more important than ever. Like I really want to keep in touch with my friends, right? But the platforms that we're using to keep in touch with our friends have kind of hijacked us. So I've been speaking at Angular conferences for years, right? And I love these crazy people. And what I love about the community and the GDE program, these people are really nice and super humble, and they're a bunch of nerds, right? So if you're hanging out in the hallway of a conference and you get a group started talking about code, like they'll just stand around and talk to you forever, right? And they're like, nobody's in a hurry because they like it. And I miss that. And so even though we've had all these meetups and we're still having online conferences, but the hallway track is like gone, right? And so that's really what I want to capture that, but also I spent a lot of time talking to attendees when I was at conferences, and I feel like it's hard to do that, right? So this Angular Nation was really created for the attendees and not so much for the big shots and the experts, but for everybody else to come in and talk and kind of get some direction. So people can come. This is kind of what I just grabbed some screenshots. People can come and post whatever they want to share, and they can ask questions, and then we try to answer their questions. And mostly right now it's me because it's kind of a new platform, right? So it's a lot of me, but there's a lot of other people in there that also can come in and ask questions. And we established right from the beginning that beginners are welcome here, right? Because I really wanted to make, like, the whole point of this place is to make a place where people feel comfortable opening up, because I meet so many introverts who are developers, right? So if you're one of those people that's just like not really comfortable, like speaking online or asking questions, or maybe you are, but it's just you don't really know kind of where to start. There's some hostile environments, especially Stack Overflow. They can be kind of harsh, right? Especially for beginners. We established from the beginning that beginners are welcome here, and I wanted to make everybody feel welcome here. So there's no like flaming people for asking stupid questions, none of that, right? But we actually get a lot more advanced questions, which I really love, because people, like, there are so many tutorials out there that are like beginner tutorials, and then I feel like, and I hear a lot that once you get to the edge of the then you like go off a cliff, right? And you're like, when you do more advanced stuff, like there are no tutorials out there. So sometimes when you get into the more advanced features, it's so difficult to find anything. And so that's where like I'm trying to get people to come in and ask questions and kind of collaborate more. The interface looks a little bit like Twitter, and right, I like Twitter. Twitter stresses me out now, but I have always liked the Twitter interface. But there's one thing that I've always struggled with Twitter, and that's going back to find something later. Like somebody posts something on Twitter, or there's like, I want to get a copy of a picture or an article that I saw, you know, and I go back a month or two later and I'm scrolling forever trying to find it. And it's really hard to like find something I'm looking for other than just, and then I get distracted, right? And then I'm like, you know, going off on a whole tangent. So we have a Twitter, we have an interface kind of like Twitter where we have like the feed, but the thing is we have tags on everything and we have topics, right? So it's much easier to go back and find something because you just like, if you want to look at GraphQL, you just go to that topic and you'll see everything that's related to GraphQL all in one place. So it's really cool. Also, we have like 20 topics, I think, so far: AngularJS, CLI, schematics. We got elements, material, lots of people talking about state management, Scully, RxJS. We have some of the authors and core team members that are here. So like, if you have a question about Scully, you can actually tag Sonder and he'll show up and answer your question. And so far, I mean, it's kind of small, right? Hopefully after it grows, maybe it won't be so easy, but right now it's pretty quick to get your questions answered. Okay, we also have a bunch of channels, and so so far all these channels are free. And so what we're trying to do is like get meetups like this to come in and kind of post their events, because the meetups have always kind of historically been like geographic, right? But with COVID, like everybody's going online anyway. So like I was saying to Tom and Max earlier, like if you're going to be online anyway, then you could actually go to all the meetups, right? You could go to Copenhagen and kind of cross. So we could have more flexibility. So what I'm trying to do is get people to post the meetup events and then also tag them. So like tonight I'm talking about dynamic components, and then maybe somebody will be talking about NGRX or something like that. And then what happens is hopefully as people start posting in here that you can actually hit the tag of the topic that you're looking for and then be able to actually find all the different talks. And so hopefully that'll continue to grow. One thing that when we launched this in May, and I was kind of shocked because we had 1,000 people join in the first week, and I was not prepared. I was expecting like maybe 100, right? And I thought it would take like a year to get to 1,000. We had 1,000 people join in the first week, which freaked me out a little bit, but it was good, right? And so I was asking them questions and just like posting like, what kind of stuff do you want to do? Because I do a lot of training, right? And what I was surprised about was that all these people really were not beginners. There's really more senior developers and architects coming in to collaborate. And so Samantha, my daughter, and I were working on an Angular beginners course, and we pivoted because we had so many more senior developers that we kind of put the beginner course aside. We're still planning to do it, but we jumped into, instead we decided to do Angular architect training, because we had like a lot of people, and me too, right? I got stuck for a while as a senior developer. Like I was really good at what I was doing, but then like, how do you go beyond that, right? And so, excuse me, when I was doing all of this consulting, it says September, but we've already finished September. And so I need to update that slide because we have another architect training group running starting Monday. So like the 19th, I think. So if you're interested in architect training, basically what I did with this training was because I've been doing so much consulting and I've gone with some really big companies, right? And what I do is I go in there and I look at their code and I see what they're doing, and then I help them, refactor the things that they're struggling with, and I teach them, really focusing on the things that they're the things that they care about the most and the things that they're struggling with the most, and I help them kind of fix their code and smooth it out, and then I get them all steady, and then I go on to the next client. But what I learned through that was, and what I put into this course, and kind of the reason why I stopped consulting and I went and decided to do this full time, is because what I found, which was driving me a little crazy, was that all these teams were kind of making the same mistakes over and over again. So I was basically teaching the same stuff at every client, right? And it started to get really repetitive for me. And I just felt like it wasn't the most efficient use of my time because I'm teaching like 2 or 3 people at a time, right? So what I did was I took all these things, because I was finding that all these companies are struggling with the same stuff, that I took all this stuff and put it into architect training. And so I do that. So this is like one little part of Angular Nation, that I have this premium course and I run it. It's really what's been the coolest part of this is that we have office hours twice a week. So I have I'm teaching them stuff, but then we come in and we have face-to-face calls like this where we can ask questions face-to-face. And that has been the most fun part of this course. So if you have questions about what you're actually working on, then you can come in and talk about it. And it's been super, super fun. So, okay, I don't want to spend too much time on that. I just want to tell you about that. There's another group starting October 19th. So if you're interested, go check it out. There's more information on Angular Nation. And also, I started the Baker's Dozen because you may know one thing about the programming industry is there's a problem with diversity, right? And I see that, and I really care, and I want to help. So this course, it's like $250, which I think it's 4 weeks, right? 4 weeks of training with one-on-one. So I think it's worth it for a lot of people. And the students that have done it have been super happy with it. But for some people, that's just really too much, right? And especially some countries that have different currencies, or some people, there's underrepresented groups that just don't have the money, right? And so if you are one of those people, if this is too much for you and you really want to take this course, please reach out to me. For every 12 students that buy tickets, we have one person that will come in for free. So if you want to be one of those people, then apply for the Baker's Dozen. And also there's a sliding scale. So if it's just too expensive, but you're interested, please reach out to me because I really want to help you make that happen. That's it, because I want to get into the code. So I'm gonna turn off my screen share for a minute and just check in with you guys and see if y'all have questions, and then I'm gonna jump back into the screen share and talk about code. Are you guys still with me? Do you have any questions, or you want me to just go to the code?
Does anybody have questions for Bonnie?
All right.
I'm here.
I'm going to the code. Okay, so I want to introduce this real quick and I want to say, before I even go back to the screen share, what I'm about to show you guys is all of the code that I'm going to show you is in a GitHub repo. Some of it I'm going to go through quickly because I really want to, there's a point to this, right? And I want to focus on the point of what I want to teach you, and not so much the code. But I just want to tell you that there is a GitHub repo, and all of the code that I'm about to show you is in the GitHub repo. So don't worry about trying to remember all this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to present and show the screen. Sometimes I turn off my screen share so I can emphasize something, and then I forget to turn it back on, and people have to tell me. I'm like, you see this right here? They say, no, Bonnie, we don't. Okay, so first, let me show you this. Okay, so I'm using, for this demo, I'm using reactive forms and Angular material for this. And I want to stress that the Angular material and dynamic forms is not the point of what I want to show you, right? This is a pattern. The pattern is the dynamic forms, and I want to talk to you about that. And I'm using reactive forms and Angular material, but that's not the point, because you could use this pattern for anything, right? And the point really is to get the business logic away from, to get the hard-coded stuff away from the business logic. Okay, so what we're going to look at is a super, super simple form, right? There's a couple of input boxes and a couple of drop downs. And like you see, right, this is just all hard-coded arrays: favorite season, favorite music genre, favorite color. It's super, super simple, and it's designed that way. Let's go look at the code. Okay, so let's start first. I want to show you what it looks like without the dynamic form, right? And again, this should be super simple. Is this size okay?
Yep, that's all good.
Okay, so I want you guys, and we have plenty of time. I love this because I'm normally trying to rush through this all in 20 or 30 minutes, but we have plenty of time. So can you guys tell me, what is anything wrong with this code? What do you see that's wrong with this? I mean, it works. The code works perfectly, right? But can you see anything that's just meh about this code that you don't like about it? Anybody? I'm going to open up the other one and see.
Not very dry, Bonnie.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so this code works, and this is pretty typical, right? You probably know about the form builder, so you don't actually have to type out new form group. You could do a form builder, but the thing is, this is just a demo, right? And what I want, this is pretty typical. This is what I see when I was doing consulting and I was going from team to team, right? And I see, and they bring in an expert because they're struggling with certain things. And when I come in to these teams, and sometimes these teams, when I get there, they already have, 20, 50, 100,000 lines of Angular when I get there, right? And this is very common that I see a lot. A lot of developers are writing code that looks like this with their dynamic forms. And again, it doesn't have to be Angular material. It's just an example. It could be PrimeNG or, whatever. But this is very typical. And so this is what I want to, like, I don't like this, because even though it's dry, it's like, I say exactly what Tom said, right? It's not dry. And what the developers tell me is, well, we can't just like put an ngFor in there because this one is an input field, but this one is a drop down, right? And so we can't, or like we have, maybe we have different dynamic pop-ups, but one of them has 2 buttons, one of them has an okay and a cancel, and one of them has a yes and, like, there's different, right? And so they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. And so what I see is that people are struggling a lot because as soon as you try to make a dynamic component, it gets advanced really quick, right? So I just want to kind of walk through this. I thought for quite a while about, because it's actually, I'm going to show you guys some stuff that I think is pretty cool. And I was planning for a while to make this into an NPM library. And I've actually had people since I started teaching it that ask me can we have this? Can we download this? I want this to be an NPM library. And I said, and I actually had it on my to-do list. And I said, you know what? No, I decided, like, on purpose not to make it an NPM library, because I'm going to tell you something. It's not that much code. And I really want you to learn how to do this. And I don't want you to have another dependency because, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, y'all. I'm just getting kind of passionate about this. Okay, the first step, because I really want to make this visual. We're going to peek here. Let's go over here, oops, and go to the constants. Okay, so if we close this here now and just look at these 2 side by side, this is kind of the first step of pulling this out, because we're going to take everything that's different, right? So, especially if you've used reactive forms before, this form control name, you have to have that for reactive forms, right? So the form control name is going to be required, and then you're going to have a field type, and we're going to look at this in a minute, right? So you got the name and the field type, and there are some other things we could do, error handling, we could do validation and stuff like that, which this is set up for. But again, I want to keep it simple. And this one you won't have for the inputs, but this is just, this is the same thing that we saw in the TypeScript. It's just a super simple array of strings, right? And again, this is just a demo. Probably if you were doing this in real life, you would have this somewhere kept in a database. You probably wouldn't hard code this, but even if you do hard code this, it's still better than sprinkling it all into because this is going to allow you to have it more dry, right? Okay, so once we have the constants, let's go back and open up. I want to start going into the cool part. This is where the magic happens. And I want to show you first the model. Okay, so the field type in this demo, I think we're only using the select drop down here and the text field here. But again, I used this, I gave you guys all the code because I've used this for several clients in big enterprise companies. And so that's why there's more built in. And so I left it there. But for the demo, we're going to keep it simple, right? So we've defined all of these. And then for each, this is a trick that there's a couple tricks that I learned along the way. And some of the stuff that I want to go through this with you is not specific to Angular. It's just like experience. And because I started out as a junior dev and I was stumbling around, bumping into stuff, right? And as I got more experience, then I learned to streamline things. And this is one of the ways, is to try to keep it very simple. What I see a lot is that people will make interfaces that are similar, and then they end up with like 3 or 4 similar interfaces. And the way that I try to avoid that is to make all these optional, right? So I have a field and I might not be using default values, or I might not be using validation, or I might not be using all of this functionality. But this question mark here makes it optional. So the only 2 that are required are name and type, right? And then this, we're going to come back to this later, but the key value pair, for some of you, this would be very obvious and simple, but it wasn't obvious and simple to me. And that's why I want to mention it, right? Because I didn't know about the key value pair. But if I have an array of key value pairs, basically the key value pair is just a key and a value. That's it, right? And this is actually what lets me keep things, because some of my projects get very, very complicated. And sometimes you need to be able to just iterate through an array. And when you have complex things going on, then the key value pair kind of allows you to make sense of it all, I think. I'm going to come back to that. Let me keep moving. I want to show you, I really like to see things visually. So I want to show you probably the easiest way to see what's going on in this dynamic field is here. Because this is the thing, right? I do a lot of training, and especially when I first started learning Angular, when I first started going to conferences, there were times that I was sitting there watching somebody talk and I was confused. And it was like, I'm really interested, but I don't understand. And it wasn't until like someone else explained the same concept to me, and it was so simple that I realized like there's a difference between, so when I write this code, I really want to keep it simple. So if you look at this ng switch here, right? There's a field type, and then you see checkbox, date picker, single radio. And so if I just shut up for a minute and let you look at this, right? I think you should be able to see pretty easily what's going on here, right? So in this file, you're only going to have one come out of here. When you come into this file, you're immediately going to get that ng switch. So this dynamic field is only one piece, right? And then we're going to go into the dynamic form, and what we're going to do is iterate through. ngFor, field of field set, we're going to pass in an array of fields, which is what you saw, right? And then we're going to go through, and for each one, there's a field here. And then we can have error handling down here. I really need to put that back in. I commented that out when I updated it to Angular 10, and it was working. So if you want to use that's Todd Motto's ngx errors. If you want to use that, you should be able to uncomment that out. You might have to fiddle with it a minute. And if you get stuck, just ping me and let me know, and I'll help you. But it's not really important for the demo. That's why I wasn't worried about it. So basically we have an ngFor here, right? This is super simple. And then we're just going through the field. So if we look again, here's the checkbox. I want to show you this next. Okay, and I'm going to go through this. This is really kind of probably the most complicated part, but I really try not, I don't want any of my Angular, because I work a lot with junior developers and even senior developers, and I really want my code to be very easy to follow. So this, even though there's a lot going on here, you'll notice that like most of this is comments, right? So, and it's not like old stuff that I left in there and commented out. It's like actual comments to help you, because this is meant for you to use, and it's meant for you to customize. But if I just scroll down here, right, there's not that much code. And like, if you, let me just randomly see this .field set .for each, and then this .form .add control, right? This is not complicated. We're doing it again. We're for each, like if we're going to have some people, a lot of clients want to have conditional fields where you have a Boolean, you can turn it on and show and hide a field, right? So that's what this is. The slide toggle with child fields is like a conditional Boolean. But the thing is that the code in here is actually very simple. And this is why I didn't want to release this as an NPM library, because number one, I don't think it's worth having another dependency, because you can copy and paste this. But more importantly, what if you're not using Angular material, right? What if you want to use this functionality with, you know, Kendo or PrimeNG or your own CSS or something like that? Or also, let's go back, because, I mean, we don't have to go back, but when we talk about basically iterating through an array, right, you pull out those, I do want to go back because I want you to look at it while, that's not here, it's here. And when we talk about pulling those constants out and iterating through, so like this is an array, right? We're just going to iterate through this with an ngFor. And what I want you to think about here, I don't want to go too fast because it's not about this specific code, because you could use the same exact pattern for dynamic pop-ups, right? I've also used this pattern. I had a client that had a lot of charts and graphs. And so they wanted to have like a dynamic graph wizard where their users could pick a graph and create a graph. And so we wrapped it in this same type of dynamic component, right? So, okay, let's go back. If we look at the folders here, we have the dynamic field and the dynamic form, right? This is the child, the dynamic field, and then the dynamic form is the parent. And so in here, we've got our ngFor. We're going through the field. I want to go back. I'm skipping around a little bit. Sorry. Again, all of this is on GitHub, right? if we go through this, I just want to go very briefly through here. We're going to import our field set from the parent component, right, from wherever we're implementing this. And then we've got our optional errors, default data, and read only if we want to do that. And then what we're going to do at the very bottom, I'm going to show you what I'm doing, because remember, we're using React. I love Angular's reactive forms, right? I think it's fabulous. I think it's very easy. I really like it a lot. I will say it was very easy. Deborah Carrata has a fabulous reactive forms course out there, and I love Deborah Carrata. And so I really like reactive forms. But when I started to create this repo, when I started to create this module, I was really struggling because I outgrew the tutorials, and like I was having a hard time finding, like, it wants a string, but I want to pass, a dynamic thing, and I was struggling with this a lot. So at the end of this, at the bottom of this file, I'm going to show you how I cleaned it up, because when I pass the values, like I want to have this, like, you show them the form, get whatever they need, right? And then once you finish working with the form and you go back up to the parent, I want to strip out the reactive forms, because then you just go, remember the key value pair? Then I just want an array of key value pairs. Just tell us what they did and then leave all that complexity behind. So all of the complexity stays here in this component. Okay, so we've got the ng on init. We're going to check and make sure that there was a field set passed in. And then if there was, we're going to initialize the form. We're going to have the form builder group. This, like, inside here, again, this is pretty basic, right? For each field, we're going to add the control, and we're also going to initialize each form field. When we go through each, and that's pretty much it, I think. We've got I have a value changes here, but that's basically just in case you want to do something, because it's not even being used. See, this is for demo purposes. So if you don't want to have a value changes, just take it out, because it's not doing anything but a console log. Then there's the optional slide toggle children. But you see this initialized form. Okay, so that's all that's in there. The initialized form is just going through and doing whatever little stuff you need to do, add your default values. Because when you push each form field into the reactive form, you could have a default value. It's when you go down, right? This .form builder .control, that's basically what you're building. So you're checking for disabled invalidation, which is all the optional fields, right? That's what's in here. And then the slide toggle children. So again, the reason why I'm going through this pretty quickly is because I think that this is all pretty self-explanatory and simple, right? I don't think this is really too important to the point. I think it's cool. And it took me a while to write all this, especially this one, because the extract form values, I did like infinite loop over infinite loop over infinite loop, because you can actually have the slide toggle. You can have an object inside of an object. And so it was a mess. But basically what this does is it just reads each one, right? It takes all of the form controls for each one, and it pushes it into a key value, see? Key value array right there. So this is super, super simple. And then it's going to extract form values. If you go back up here is where somewhere, I don't know where it is. Okay, well, somewhere it's in there. Is it here? I don't know where it's called. Now it's going to bug me. Is it even called? I think it might be called from, oh yeah, it's called from, where is it called from? No. Sorry, guys. Here it is. So, okay, so this is used, that's the old one. I'm not sure I'm using that in the demo. Let me go back. Sorry, I just distracted myself. The demo with form. I'm not sure I'm using that. Okay, I left it in there because I really like it and I always use it, but I'm not sure that it actually is hooked up in the demo, and it doesn't look like it is, but the functionality is there. I'm going to keep going because I think that you guys can see exactly what, right? Extract form fields, names into an array of key value pairs. And then this is what gets passed up somewhere in here. I don't know how this thing works. I wrote it a long time ago. When it does the output, emit form values, that's what's going to go up. Somewhere it's calling that, I think. I could be wrong. Okay, so let me see in here. Okay, so I showed you this, right? And I think this is pretty simple. I wanted to mention one thing. Hold on, let me stop for a drink here. In the interest of full disclosure, I just wanted to mention one thing. The ng switch case is actually not the best way to do this. Well, it depends, right? The ng switch case I really like a lot because I feel like it's so easy to look at it and see. Like I feel like it's you can see exactly what's going on here, and I think even a junior developer can look at it and see. Like I think it's I like it. It's just it feels so easy to me, right? However, it's not the fastest because I always teach my devs to keep the business logic out of the HTML because you really want to keep your templates as simple as possible. And this kind of violates my own rule with that. However, you could do this. The reason why is because the ng switch case is not exactly the fastest. I don't worry about it in this particular case because I'm not going to have like more than maybe a dozen form fields on one page at one time in most use cases. But like if I were going to have 500 on a page, I would not use the switch case because it would be faster. I could do the exact same thing faster with the component factory resolver. See, it's late and I didn't get much sleep last night. So is that right, Tom? Component factory resolver?
That sounds like an excellent choice.
Yes, so I really like the component factory resolver, and I use it and I recommend it, and I would actually probably use it in this case. But again, I wrote this and I use this a lot for teaching, and I think that the switch case is just easy to see and it's a little bit less intimidating. But I just want you guys to remember that and think about that, because if you want to do something like this, but if it's on a page, like if you were doing like a grid or something where you might have 500 elements on a page, don't use the switch case. Use the component factory resolver, which it's not intimidating because you just know that it does exactly the same thing as a switch case, but it happens in the TypeScript instead of in the HTML, which is actually better for efficiency. But for teaching, right? And again, in this particular instance, I'm probably not ever going to have 500 form fields on one page ever, which is why in this case, I actually intentionally decided to use the switch case. So, but that's not, I want to show you something else. This, okay, remember that this was the child and this was the parent, right? So we're iterating through these. So, and remember I had this, this actually was working. I just uploaded it. I needed to update ngx errors when I updated Angular 10 and I didn't. However, when I was doing, because when I did this, this all was working, right? All the errors, because you actually have the validation. I don't have it in here. I should add that. When I was working on the validation, I really started coming into some problems because I needed to get some information from the child to the parent. And so what I started doing was here, for each one of these, I was having to pass like whatever, there's only one happening, but I need to know if it's checked or dirty or pristine. You know what I'm talking about? Like all those reactive form things, has it been touched or any of that kind of stuff, so that I could have the proper errors, because the errors were showing up in the parent. And so that was messing me up a lot. And what happened was this field here, this file was getting more and more because I was actually grabbing the dirty, checked, all these Booleans from reactive forms and then passing them up with an emit. And I was putting more and more code here. And so then I had all these like value changes. I was watching all this stuff and all these observables, and it was just getting messier and messier. And this is really where I want to stop for a second and speak to you as a GDE, because there's one thing. I've been doing this Angular stuff, and I like people, right? There was a lot of introverts, but I'm an extrovert. And so I love Angular developers because they're like wicked smart and really stubborn, fun people. And so I talk to a lot of people, and what I have found invariably, very consistently, the difference, because I work with a lot of experts and I work with a lot of beginners, right? And the difference between the two is very consistently, the Angular experts write less code, always. And this is where I want you guys to remember this when you're working, because, and I'm a really nice person, right? I mean, I'm busy. I don't always, like, I can't always help you, but I really, like, you're welcome to reach out to me, because what I was doing was I was writing more and more code, and I was like, I don't like this. You ever feel like that when you're writing code? You're like, okay, it works, but I don't, like it doesn't bring me joy, right? And I want it to bring me joy. So it wasn't bringing me joy because I was just writing more and more code, and I was just feeling it. And so what I stopped, and this is when I've actually learned in the last couple of years to meditate. If you're not meditating, try it. It's amazing, right? So I just had to kind of stop and slow down for a minute. See, I talk too fast because I get excited. I had to stop and slow down. And this was something, this beautiful thing happened because I found this, like, have you ever even heard of this? Where is it? Form control. It's here, form group directive. What the heck is a form group directive? I had never, this was like the most obscure little thing that I've never heard of before. I've never seen anybody talk about it at a conference, or I've never seen a blog post. Tom, are you Googling it right now? I see Tom, not right now. Wait, stay with me, Tom. Okay.
I think you've used it, Tom.
I know, because it's okay. The point is this, right? It's not about the form group directive, but the form group directive, it actually is really cool because as soon as I did this, I take this dot control. See, remember, this is the component that has the switch case, right? So I actually have my form controls in here, right? And so this is the reactive form. This is where all the functionality of the reactive form is. And so what I was having to do in order to get my error checking working in the parent is I had to actually pass this. Is it dirty? Is it checked? I have to, like, I'm trying to get all that in the parent. And that's why I was getting frustrated. And when I found this beautiful little obscure hidden form group directive, what happened was I deleted like 50 lines of code and replaced it all with this. And as you'll notice, most of this component is comments because I'm going, oh, look at this beautiful thing, right? So I just linked back to the docs because I've never heard anybody talk about this, but this allowed me. So I passed this, right? And I really need to turn it back on because I don't really think it doesn't look as cool because it's commented out, but then I can get the dirty checked. I can get all that with all of the functionality of, because remember, in the parent is where I'm doing all this. Do you remember all this reactive form stuff? That was the form builder group, right? The field sets. I'm doing that form.add control. I'm actually interacting with all of those reactive form fields from one component to another, which was like redonkulous to me. I was so excited because I was writing so much code that I didn't need. So this is really where, and again, I want you guys, like, it's not about the code, right? Because if you do as much Angular as I've done, and you do as much, I work with all these different teams, and I see people who are struggling, and like, it's not, when I'm talking to people, when I'm doing training, right, I don't want to go, and this is like, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning when I was talking about this architect training. I don't want to teach, like I started in the beginning, like I'm just trying to teach like everything there is to teach about Angular. The problem is that's not a good idea because in order to take that course, it's going to take you 100 hours, right? And it's going to take me a year to make all the videos. But what I do with training and what I really found is important is I want to talk to people and see what they're working on and then help them with that specifically. So this, what I want you to take away from this talk, and again, you can have the code, right? I know you want the code. If people really like this code, it's free. You can have it. You can plagiarize it. You can use it, make it your own. But that's not the point of this talk. That's not what I want you to remember. What I want you to remember is, number one, get the constants away from the business logic. Get the constants out of the HTML. If it's almost dry, but it's not dry, get the constants, and then you can iterate through an array. And what you have to do, I want to go back. I get so excited and I just talk too fast. I want to go back to the interface, right? Because you need this. And this is really, like, I feel like sometimes these dynamic components, you know, you see all these NPM libraries out there and it just feels really intimidating. And when I built this, like in the beginning, I wasn't an expert back then and it was really hard, right? And so if I go all the way back to the early days of my, and especially if you're not in charge of the back end and you're like pulling something from the back end and then you're trying to create a UI, sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to create a UI on top of a backend that's still being written, right? How much fun is that? So here's really, once you have to have an interface, right? And this is a TypeScript thing. We know this from TypeScript, but really you have to have an interface because you need it for this, right? You got to know what all this stuff is called. You need to be able to pass this stuff, right? So if you think about it like this, once you've got this interface, once you know what the fields are called, then it's not really so complicated. And well, I say that, right? I say that because I have all these friends and I can call my friends and ask them if I get stuck, and I do, right? So I go back to what I said in the beginning, where you have all these tutorials. There's so many beginner tutorials, but then once you start trying to do more advanced stuff, you like go off the cliff and there's no more tutorials. And so if you run into something like that, reach out. I mean, that's what GDEs are there for, right? And hopefully, I mean, I try to be really not like intimidating. I want to be kind of goofy and approachable because I want people to come to me for help. And I can't always debug your code, but I can usually point you in the right direction. Okay, so I think that, no, one more thing. I'm just seeing if there was anything else that I needed to show you, and I did. I have to show you the coolest part at the end. Okay, so I showed you the parent and the child, right? And so what you want is we look back at that model again. We're basically just passing. Oh, there's the sentence case, just takes it from a camel case to a sentence case so that we don't have to pass. Because remember, we've got that sentence case. Okay, so from here, we've got this. Then all we need to do, and I showed you, let's go look at the very end. I'm almost done. Stay with me. Once we have the constants, right? Now, and remember, I want to open this up side by side. The demo without, right? This is what it looked like before. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like, this same exact file with the dynamic form, right? So we've got all this, and this is just not dry. And then we flip it out. We pull all the constants out to here. And now, see, this is in the new one. This is with the dynamic form, right? So we import that dynamic form. We've got our constants here. And then we grab it from the constants file here. We pass it in. This is the left form, right form. There's nothing here, right? And this is what it looks like now. All we have to do is pass in that field set. It's an array. It's beautiful. And you'll also notice here that I have the mat grid tile because, do I still have that open? Right. I've got one here and one here, which I didn't even get into the edit form, but you get the, we got default values loaded in there, right? Let me show you this one. The default values, I think, are here. This is for the edit form. And again, you're not going to hard code this. You're probably going to keep this in a database somewhere, right? But you get the idea. So once you pull this out, and really, this is really fun for me because once this is implemented, imagine, just look at this and imagine when your client comes back and asks you to add another form field, like, you know, it's going to take you 5 seconds and you're going to be done. The reason why I wanted to show this, the reason why I kept this grid tile out, because a lot of people talk to me about how to style this and like they want to have different, every client has, most clients are very specific about what they want the UI to look like. And this I just go back to the same thing I said before. That's why I didn't make it an NPM library, because after I've walked through this, you should be able to go get this and really use it, right? Because I want you to know how to use it and not just take the code that I wrote, and like I want you to be able to do anything that you want to it. So that is that's my talk. You guys have questions? I'm going to leave the screen share open in case you have questions. That's it.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think you deserve a sort of virtual round of applause here. So I'm going to start the drum roll. Okay.
Thank you. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would it be okay if I took the liberty of posting your GitHub repo on the chat for this?
Absolutely. Let me put a link for you here.
Okay.
And where is the, I got to find it. I got it. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see that. Hopefully all you guys can in the chat window. Okay. I'm also going to post, for the sake of it, angularnation.net as a link.
Yes, all you need is an email address. Angular Nation is free. There is, remember, this Reactive Forms demo is one part of 1 week of the architect training. But I think I'm going through the architect training is like all of the big things that the mistakes that people are struggling with, especially big enterprise companies, because it breaks my heart because they call me in because I'm an expert. They call me in for help. They've already got 50,000 lines of code. And I'm like, oh, and so I help them get it all, it's really difficult for them to pay to refactor code that technically works, but it's just messy, And so I really like to try to teach, like I'm teaching the stuff that I've been teaching my clients for years is exactly what I'm teaching in the course. Like everything that I do for my clients, like now you can go and do it. And then hopefully we'll get everybody with better standards, because this is the crazy thing. Like what I tried, I really try to keep this simple. I want it to be easy. I want you guys to look at this presentation and go, oh, I understand all of that, right? And I don't want you to be stressed out. And it's the same thing with the architect course, because I see people making mistakes, but then once we get to like what actually went wrong, it's simple stuff underneath it all. Even architects, they make mistakes and like they know it, but they forget it. Anyway, so that's what we try to focus on.
You're damn right there, Bonnie. I forgot one part of this, and so I've actually got a question for you, if I may.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping maybe some of you guys have some questions, so get ready. Yeah, regarding a form group directive, I think you saw me making notes on another screen. I've been using an injected ng control to get connection to the control value accessor. Okay. I wonder if you could show us that neat piece of code, the single line, because I'd like to focus in on that, because that's kind of something I need to lift.
Yeah, and remember that because I like this was such an obscure thing for me. But the point of this is remember when I said this was the part where I said the Angular experts write much less code, because there are so many little obscure things like this in Angular. And I've found a lot of little things along the way that they're especially if you have, a GDE or ask any, not just me, right? There are a lot of GDEs, but it's really the point of this is when you just like the code should bring you joy, right? There are so many things in Angular where it's like one line is so powerful and it's just a matter of finding them. It's just knowing that you're looking for something. So it's not about that. It's just about like, if you don't love your code, ping me and tell me why, and I can try to help you. Or even just like looking, like there's got to be a better way to do it. And then there is, and it's just so joyful.
All right, I intend to ping you with my code shortly. But in the meantime, could you show me where that control object is used in your template? Because clearly you're using it.
So this dot control.
Yeah, so this dot control, is that in your template?
Now here, see this form control here?
Yeah.
So the form control in each one is control. And so this is where it's passing everything with it. See how simple this is? Like, isn't that crazy? And before I found that, this line without the comments was like 50 or, I mean, I was just writing more and more and more, because this is the thing. This is kind of really where like I have a lot of fun with Angular, because it's really beautiful if you get it down to the simplest thing. And it can be very powerful, but it's kind of art at that point. And unfortunately, I see so many people writing it the original way that I showed, where it's just like all of it's not dry, right? That's so typical, and I see that everywhere.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing about that directive is that the normally speaking, when you've got that form control directive, it's normally wrapped in a form group directive at the top. But in this case, you've already done that at the component above it. And now you just and instead
because
of using,
here, and this is where we're doing the form builder group. So we're actually doing all of the reactive forms logic. And see, even remember, where was that? Remember there was like a value changes in here?
Yes.
So we're actually we're interacting from one component to another. And that's why I had to keep doing all those inputs and outputs and emit every time it changed. And that's what I was trying to get away from. And this is really where like there's so many little places where if we just get out of the way and let Angular do that for us. Like I have a lot of clients that struggle with change detection. And I'm like, why are you writing all that code? You know, no, you're making more work for yourself. Angular will do all of that for you. And this is another instance of that. But sometimes that's tricky because how do you know like when to stop writing code and go look for, you know, the form value the form value accessor or whatever it's called.
Absolutely. That's it is a difficult decision. I think particularly around forms, I've struggled with it. Yeah, I think it's an area it's okay to struggle because it's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I struggled with this for a long time, especially this one down here, because that extract form values was like infinite loop time, like crazy. But yeah, that's why I wanted to say, I intended to make this an NPM library for a long time, and I had it on my, and I sat down to actually do it. And then I was like, you know what? No, I'm just going to teach them all how to do it and give it to them. And maybe somebody else will make an NPM library, but I still don't think it's like, I don't want you to have another dependency.
I've got one more question for you, Bonnie.
Yes.
In the absence of other people putting up hands.
Han has 2 questions.
Oh, well, in that case, I'd better butt out. But if you could loop back and talk about Component Factory Resolver, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Han, do you have questions?
Hi, Bonnie. Yes, I have 2 questions. First, I already requested to join Angular Nations. It was a great talk, so thank you very much. And second, I tried to do something very similar like this. It was like a deja vu with this dynamic forms. And back in 2019, we tried to do it actually with JSON schema. So instead of using the form constant you showed previously, we thought, okay, what is maybe a more universal, ubiquitous language or thing that everybody can use, and that was JSON schema. And so it was like big deja vu looking at this, what you just showed. And I have like 2 questions concerning that. So one of the more difficult thing is to know where to abstract. Because this is one of the biggest difficulties, because when you start writing a library or a dynamic component, which is the goal is to make writing forms more easy, right? But then it comes to the point where another customer wants a specific error message, or another customer wants some async field, maybe checking the name if it's already in a database or not. So then you're at a point where, okay, my component right now can't do that. I could try to extend its feature but then again, I have to make sure that it works it's backwards compatible to all the other codes. So my question to you is that when you are creating a library like this and you want to use it across multiple projects, how do you decide which features are too complex to put it into your awesome dynamic library? And what do you actually say, okay, even though it's not dry, even if it's repetitive, at least any junior developer can read and develop it. So what is the line you draw here in your experience? So that's the first question.
That is a beautiful question. I love that question. Okay, so do I still have this up? So basically, I'm like, the question that I asked in the beginning was like, what's wrong with this, right? For me, because my passion is teaching, and I really teach with a lot of empowerment. I'm going to tell you a story about my daughter, and I think she can hear me, and she's probably going to kill me for this. But I'm just going to, don't tell her I told you this. So when Samantha was preparing a talk for ngConf a couple years ago, and she was talking about animations, and there was a brand new thing that just came out with animations called Stagger. It was a new functionality, and Matthias had just premiered it, right? And I was like, this is really cool. So I had suggested to Samantha that she should include that in her demo. And she was like, oh, I'm just going to use the demo that I already have. And I was like, what? Why? And so actually, she was like 16 at the time. So we actually had an argument. Can you imagine having an argument with your 16-year-old daughter? So we had an argument, and I was like, I don't understand. Like, if you're going to go and do this conference talk, why don't you want to show this cool new functionality, right? And so finally because she just kept like, I don't want to talk about it, Mom, just butt out, right? And finally we had this big confrontation, and she goes, I don't know how, okay? It was like, oh, well, is that all? Because I can help you with the code, right? So for me, like, it's easy for me to say, like, if it's not dry, then I'm going to pull it out because I know how, right? But it really is a matter of like, how much time, because the first time I did this, it took me like 3 weeks to get it all working. And it was like hard, right? Because I didn't know how to do it. And there weren't a lot of, so my goal here with all of you is to empower you. Like if you know how, then it's not as, because it really moves the place, right? If you know that it's going to be 2 weeks worth of work, then it's really going to take a lot. And this is why developers keep writing it like this, right? Because they know they don't like it. But if they try to do something, and I've actually been guilty of this myself, because I wasn't always a GDE and I didn't always have this great network of people, right? That's like my superpower now. I know everybody in the Angular community, so I could just call and ask. I didn't always have that. And so what I would do is I would try to do something cool, and then I couldn't get it working. And so I would fall back and just like, at least I have deadlines, right? I don't have time. Yeah. So I would just keep moving. So really it's more about, you know how to do it. Like if you know about the component factory resolver and the switch case and you know the difference between the two, then you can make that, it's a very easy decision. I should use this here and use this here. So if you know how to do this, and that's, I think why I wanted to make the process less intimidating, to say like, start with your interface and then pull it out and, you know, and pull the constants out, because it could be, it really, when I look at this, right, the place when you start to do something like this is really when it's not dry anymore. When you see that you have this repetition, especially if you're, this is really, when I started doing a lot of consulting and especially with Angular with the architect training that we talk about a lot in office hours, you know, as a developer to make your code dry, right? But what I see and what we see a lot is if you're a really good developer and you're in a great team and your whole team is great and your company is great and your product is great, you grow and grow and grow, then you start having problems, right? And so then it's not just your code that needs to be dry, it's your whole team. Like what happens when you become an architect and like everybody's code needs to be dry, and that's where it really gets more complex. So then you write stuff like this, because what I found is like, I have seen teams, I'm not going to say who, because I don't want to pick on anybody, but I had a client, I love them. When I arrived, when I first met them, they had 19 pages of reactive forms, and they all looked like this. Just that, like, not dry. It was all just hard coded with the first name and the last name for every single page. 19 pages, and they were 19 different components that were very close to identical. And same thing with pop-ups, right? I've seen material dialog boxes or toast notifications they're so similar, like 7 different components with 7 different dialogues, and the only thing different between all 7 dialogues is the message and the buttons. And so that's where I would do this exact same thing with, and I have with pop-up dialogues. Same idea. Did that answer your question? Was that your first question or your second question? You had 2.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest question for me is like, where would you, in your experience, draw the line? I mean, you have, let's say you have already a dynamic component which already covers, let's say, the basic field. Let's say select, input, text area, some checkboxes, and so on. Mm-hmm. And it covers like it has a certain level, what feature set which it covers in a certain use case. And now you get, and this is something you, for example, you want to use in multiple customer projects. Yes. And now you get a new feature from a new customer. So, and this feature might be, let's say it's an async validation for a field where you have to check against the database whether the value already exists or not. So something which is not covered in your dynamic, and suddenly you have a new level of complexity. You have async, you have like REST calls. So this is a much more complicated feature. So what would be your approach to say, okay, first, should we include this async validation into this dynamic component? And if so, what would be your process or approach on how to do it? Because you have to ensure that it works in the future and also with all the past projects. So what is
I'm with you. Okay, so it's here. There's something in here for like the pre-fill data for the defaults, right? But if it's happening like in real, so ideally what I would want to do, so with this demo with dynamic form, in this one, you see how I have the forms hard-coded? Mm-hmm. Ideally, what I would want to do is I would want to go ahead and resolve that and fetch that, right? And then I'm like, see here on the edit form, I have my pre-fill data here. Well, I would actually get that from a database, right? Or I would handle that hopefully in the parent. But if you actually need to be like, because sometimes like I've seen, what is it? like I think Microsoft Teams has it where you can like start typing someone's name, something like that has
like
to
a
be
type
like
ahead,
that's a little more advanced. And so if you have a type ahead that like you can't really do it in the parent, I guess you probably could, but for that, I would probably put that in there. I would probably put that in here. But again, like this really, it goes back to the point that I made, Han, that this is why I didn't want it to be an NPM library.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I want you to be able to extend it. And I don't want to be like, you know, so that you can do that. So you can take this and you can see how everything's working. And then you can go, okay, I can use what Bonnie already wrote. And then I can add this and then just run with it. So it hopefully will bring that. I think when you're talking about like when to make something dynamic is just really, it comes down to how much time you have and how much experience you have. Because if I could do this, especially after I already had it written, when I brought it to the second client and I already had it, it took like 2 seconds. So then it was like, it wouldn't take that much. But if you have this already, then I think it would be pretty easy. And people will do stuff like this more. But if you're like the first time I did it, and I was having a lot of problems because there weren't tutorials out there for some of this stuff, right? And so it took me a long time. So that is where I'm hoping to bring the bring that down, so where it's easier for people to do stuff like this more. Because I think this is the thing. Really, if you're writing code like, where was it? With the one without, if you're writing code like this, and this is so typical, and I see this so much. And it works. And this is technically Angular, but this code, I believe, really misses the beauty entirely of Angular. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the second question was like, you said that this approach that you do here with the dynamic component, you already use it and consulted a lot of companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in your experience, you said like there were companies with 19 pages of forms with I don't know how many form controls they had. So how much time did they in average like take to refactor the existing code they had into something like this? Do you have some estimation values what it was like, how much it costs?
Luckily for that particular client that was in Denver, I joined the team on page 3. So they had done 3 full, and I think there was probably a dozen, maybe 12 to 16 questions per page, and they looked exactly like this. And so they actually had a developer, maybe 2 developers that were writing code exactly like this, and they were on the 3rd, and they hired me, and I was supposed to be there for 2 months to help them finish 19 pages of them, just because it was going to take a long time. So I came in and I saw them doing this, and I was like, whoa, stop doing that. And I brought in mine, and then the rest of the night, I mean, yeah, we were finished like very quickly, because once I did that, where was it? Because it looked like this, right? This is a lot for 19 pages. But once, I mean, if you go to what it looks like here, like then all they needed to do for every page, now every page looks like this, and they have the this one off to the side. That's it. Then they have to do this 19 times. Like, how beautiful is that? You know? And that's the thing, where if you especially if you have 19 pages, then this was, and also because we got lucky, because I told them, I was like, well, the last client paid me 3 weeks to do this work, and guess what? I'm going to implement it for you in 1 day. And they were very happy about it. And so now you get this because I'm giving this to you. So you can take it if you want it and implement it in 1 day, and you don't have to spend 3 weeks on it. And then it'll be great. And you can thank Tom for making me come here and share this with you.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
You're most welcome, Han.
Oh, and Han, I also just approved your request to join.
Thank
you. You're in. And if you have any more questions, just go ask me. Okay, was that both of your questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
And Tom, you want to talk about the control?
Yeah, just before I do, actually, I just wanted to pipe up with one that Han was talking about there. Probably the way I would solve it as well is to use content projection.
Yes.
So I would use your form builder the way you got it, but I would allow that component to accept content projection and have yet another switch case injected into it with custom components. And I would recycle the elemental components so that if you've got custom errors firing off, you just use one new component, but recycle the other components.
You could
Absolutely.
also, very, very similar, you could also allow it to take a template as an input. So, I mean, very similar, but could work a bit slightly different
We
way.
actually did all that. The point is that there comes to a certain point where the code is really hard to explain to newcomers because you're sort of starting your company internal syntax, let's say that way. So even though sometimes it's not dry, you have to weigh the benefit against, okay, is this code something I can give to a junior developer for refactoring, for changing, so that you don't have to put a senior to it? And other times, like, okay, does a senior has to now write some complex features into it so that it is like reusable in the future? And I think that is the difficulty in its abstraction I talked about earlier.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Funnily enough, I've been down this kind of route in the past before, and it works really, really well when you have like just the same thing to just bash out over and over again. If you want to like streamline that and make it really fast and efficient for your developers, this works fantastically. Things that like if you have a project that's a little bit more like bespoke and you don't really have that so many repetitions of things and things kind of vary a lot more, then yeah, maybe it's better to go a different approach. But this can certainly work well when there's like a lot of controls and a lot of forms. So I think what I'm saying is I think it depends. In a lot of cases, you'll be sort of informed by the type of project that you're working on, whether or not to use this kind of approach in the first place anyway.
And remember, it doesn't have to be reactive forms because I've used this same pattern for pop-ups, material pop-ups, and graphs, charts, grids. We had one customer that had basically a grid on each. I think it was an AG grid they were using on every page, and they were all different. But they were even coming from the same. I think they were coming from the same database. I don't remember, but it was like all these different views depending on whether you're an admin or whether you're a user, or like what kind of role privileges you have. But they were all these different components that just had different columns. And they were showing different columns, and some things they could see and some things they couldn't see. And I was like, you don't need to, like, we just need to pass in the column name and make it dynamic. And we didn't have to have all these different components. So that's really where if you find that you have 5 different components that are very similar, you don't have to live like that.
Yeah, I have to say, like, the Ionic team did a great job for as example for their allures, dialogues, toes. But basically, we ripped off their code for our own web projects. So if you're meaning that case with that, I definitely agree. For those cases, write a service which handles in a single component. So that's definitely the better way to go. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. We seem to be having a very senior developer conversation here. Has anybody else got any questions?
I want to drop a link in the chat, if that's okay, Tom, for the controlled value accessor.
Oh, yes, thank you.
But I just want to say about I think if you scroll down, there's an example there. But basically the control value accessor, and I was talking to, I make friends with a lot of my architects. So my past clients, I usually keep in touch with them because I just love them and we're friends. And so there was a girl named Camille that I was working with, and she was actually the client that had 19 forms. She was the architect on that one. And I told them to stop, and I brought this in, and she really liked it. And we were talking about I told her about the switch case versus controlled value accessor because I was deciding whether or not I should use which one. And I was asking her, like, how many fields would you ever have on one page? And we were talking through that. And she was like, why do you want to know? And so we talked about the control value accessor, and we didn't use it for this, but she actually wanted to use that for something else. So then she was very interested in that. And I then convinced her, which was very difficult because she was very shy and introverted, but she was such a cool person. I convinced her to do a conference talk about the control value accessor because she actually put together a demo for herself. And all she did was she had a bunch of colored boxes. And it was really, she just did a proof of concept for herself with this control value accessor. And it was really beautiful because she just had like 5 different colors of boxes, and that's it. It was just a CSS box. That was it. And then she would flip from, you know, I want to show this one and this one and this one, and it just had a different colored box. But the reason why it was so cool was because it was a little tiny demo, and it took her like a couple hours on a Saturday to put together the proof of concept. And she was just showing the control value accessor. It was just so visual. I love teaching visual because you can see it, you know. And so if you wanted to use the control value accessor, and again, it's exactly the same as the switch case, but it happens in the TypeScript instead of the HTML, and it's faster. So if you wanted to use that, I would recommend doing exactly what Camille did, which is just do a little proof of concept with a, you know, colored box, something really simple. And if you get stuck, or if you get stuck with anything, right? I work with a lot of developers, and what I say is, like, if you get stuck, come and ask me for help, and then I get them unstuck, and then they go off running again for another week, right? So to me, I don't mind. The only thing that I say is there's some people that abuse the privilege, and they start coming to me like twice a day going, Bonnie, help me with this, Bonnie. And I'm like, no, you know, once a week, come on. But you get the idea. Like, I really want to help, because sometimes I can, in 5 minutes, I can save you 2 hours, you know, because I might know something off the top of my head. No promises, but I've learned a lot of stuff. So if I can.
I've got one last diversionary question for you, Bon.
Yes.
Okay. How did you become a GDE, and what's it like?
Oh, that is such a good question. Yeah. So that could actually segue into a whole, see, I have to, yeah. Luckily, I didn't get much sleep last night. Otherwise, I would just talk about this forever, because I really think it's an important topic. Okay, y'all. Remember I said most developers, and yell at me if I'm wrong, right? But in my experience and all the travels I've traveled, I've gone to a lot of Angular conferences. Most developers are very shy. Well, because they don't know you, right? But every one of these developers, like, once I get to know them a little bit, then the crazy comes out. Then I actually get to see how goofy they are and how fun they are. And then we're comfortable with each other, right? And so, and you're probably all the same way. Like, once you get familiar with somebody, then it's so much easier. So it seems very scary to ask Ben Lesh a question, because he's Ben Lesh, right? But after you've had, you know, drunken karaoke with Ben Lesh, he's a huge goofball, and he's not scary at all. Same thing with Mike Rocky. He's like the Cookie Monster. He's like a big, you know, teddy bear. He's such a nice person. And these people are so goofy and silly, and like, they're really lovely. And so traveling at conferences for me really helped me a lot to kind of break that barrier and not feel so intimidated. And the problem is that I still see so many people out there kind of behind the barrier. So in order to be a GDE, which I learned all this backwards, right? The reason why I wanted to be a GDE was because, like, all these really cool people that I met, like the nicest people that I met at conferences, like, they're speaking at a conference and they're like standing in the hallway talking to me. And I'm like, oh, I can't believe, like, the speaker just sat down and had lunch with us at our table. Can you believe that? You know, it was like just starstruck. So these people were really nice people. I didn't actually even know what the heck GDE stood for. I just thought all the cool people have this thing on their jacket and it says GDE. And I was like, I want to be a GDE. I didn't even know, right? But a GDE is a Google Developer Expert, and they have a bunch of categories, and Angular is one of the categories. And basically, the job of a GDE is to learn things and then help the community. We don't get paid. We just basically are the people who are helping. So we are kind of early adopters that go out and figure stuff out and kind of bang through it and, you know, stumble around. And then we go and do the meetups and the conference talks and training and stuff like that. And we just try to pass along the knowledge. And so when the Google team sees that we're doing that, then they'll bring us into the GDE program. So the way to become a GDE is basically go ahead and start acting like a GDE, which is to get out there and teach in meetups and blog posts and conferences and stuff like that. Well, for a lot of people, two things that I hear. Number one, yes, I would absolutely love to do that, but I'm not an expert yet. So a lot of people say, I'm going to do that when I'm an expert, but I'm not an expert. And so I can't do that. And the other thing that I hear, especially, this is the strangest thing, because I moved to Europe last year, which I love, right? And so many people in Europe say, oh, I'm not that great with my English is not that great. And I'm like, you know, most Americans only speak one language. Like so the fact that you speak like 3 or 4 languages and like it just boggles my mind. So I would say if you have any problems with you're not an expert yet, or your English is not perfect, or I mean, you guys are from UK, you could probably speak. I'm assuming you speak English fine. But really, public speaking, I think, holds a lot of people back from that. But here's the thing, you guys, most of the people that are watching, most of you, right? If I like, you don't really care like what shirt I'm wearing, or, you know, how much makeup, or what my speaking, if the code is cool, you're going to be happy. Right. And like, I've seen people like such warm, appreciative feedback. And it's not about the stage presence. The developers don't care about that. Developers care if you're teaching me something cool and I can understand what you're saying, right? So it's not about, but public speaking is scary. And I just want to say, I was not always like this. I was not always an extrovert. If you go way back to like when I first started ngHouston and see like some of those very early, even before we were even on YouTube, it was tragic, right? I was terrified. And even still, I still have anxiety if I'm doing a big show, or I'm like here with you guys, like everybody's looking at me, right? It's not that easy. But the one thing that I can say that helped me a lot, and this is the advice that I have reminded myself a lot, and this is the advice that I have for you guys. If you're gonna do a podcast or a meetup, number one, prepare, right? The only reason why I look like I know what I'm talking about is because I have notes, right? And I'm going through it, and I have notes. I've practiced in my slides. I have notes. All of the people that you see doing presentations have practiced and rehearsed and done, like we have time to go through it, right? Just like you would if you're doing something with your team. But also, you just can't take it too seriously. That's the thing. If I watch back my recording, I'm going to be like, oh my goodness, I messed up on this part, and I got flustered on this part, and then there was that one part where I couldn't even remember where I called my own function. And I will like pick my own performance apart, right? And that's normal. And I think you just like don't do that, because you might not ever feel like an expert if you're comparing yourself to people that you're seeing, you know, in speaking conferences, people who like, I've had a lot of experience. I've been in the Angular community a long time. But if you realize like there are new people picking up Angular every single day, and if you turn around and look at the people that started after you, to them, you are absolutely an expert, like big time. And you have so much to offer. So yeah. So if you want to be a GDE, help teach. And also I did not know this, but it's actually real. I wanted to be a GDE because the cool kids were GDEs. But once I became a GDE, my billable rate went up, because then everybody thought I was an expert, because I'm like, literally it says expert, right? So it's really good. It's good for your career. It's just, if you like helping people, then you should start, and especially Angular Nation. Like I said, Angular Nation was created to make people feel comfortable more sharing, posting online. It's supposed to be like a friendly environment. Everybody's welcome. And I asked Stephen, especially now with coronavirus, like if people are like answering questions on Angular Nation and helping other people, does that count towards GDE activity? And he said, I don't see why not. So if you're helping, whether it's Stack Overflow, or you're writing blog posts, or you're speaking at meetups or whatever, also, that reminds me, I'm so glad you asked me that question, Tom, because I wasn't even going to mention it, but it's a really good thing. In Angular Nation, we have a bunch of free community channels. And just last week, I started a channel called Call for Papers, which is basically just, it's if you are a meetup organizer, or if you want to speak. I'm just trying to help people find each other. So if you want to do conference talks, or if you want to do meetup talks, or if you want to do anything like that, if you've never done it before, let me know, because there are some meetup organizers who are very welcoming to new, inexperienced speakers, and I'm one of them. I have Angular Air, which is like big speakers, but ngHouston, I have a lot of speakers who have never done a talk ever in their lives go on ngHouston for the very first time. It's okay if you're a beginner. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh no, one more. I was like, there was one more thing I can't remember. Okay, one more thing was, there was a channel. There's a free channel, because I'm matching people up, right? The the call for papers. If you're interested in being a GDE or just interested in like kind of getting into this meetup stuff, go there, because I'm not the only Angular meetup organizer who's really welcoming to new people, because there's other people that will put you on their show even if you don't have a lot of experience. But also there's another free channel called ProNet, Professional Networking. This is another place where I'm trying to match people up. If you are looking for a job, or if you're hiring, either one, go to that channel and put a post, and then you can contact other people who are posting. And it's free. It's free for people looking and people, like, it's free for both sides. I'm just making a place for y'all to find each other.
Is that all on the Angular Nation, the ProNet one?
Yes.
Well?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's all free. And I personally, I have pet peeves, you guys. I don't like spam emails. I don't like being on marketing lists. I'm like I have enough email. So you have complete control over your notifications. If you like, I think you get an automated email every time you join a channel, but then that's it, right? And then you get, but if you don't want to get any emails, you could just turn them off, and you're not going to get spammed. Yeah. Because I don't like that kind of stuff. And I'm also not data mining. I'm not ever going to sell your emails ever. I don't like that. I hate that. So it's all, yeah. Han has another question.
Han wants to get more detailed.
I love talking about this code. Okay, I'm going to turn my screen share back on.
I just in the meantime, while we were talking, I was digging through the code, and the form group directive was particularly interesting. And so I went to the Angular docs to just read it a little bit. So my general question is, like, the form group directive is, how to say it, like, my question is like where the injection takes place, because it seems to me that it's not a service, it's a directive. But as far as I know, that child components can get instances or the references to parent directive using the @host decorator. So I'm just wondering here, if you do know the workings underneath Angular, how in the dynamic field component in the constructor form group directive, how it's getting the reference to the form group. Do you know that, or can you explain it a little bit? How you can get this? How you get the reference?
I don't know. Hold on. So what you're talking about? Hold on. Let me look. Let me go to the library. Are you talking about in here? How does it work in here, or how does it work?
No, in the library, the dynamic reactive form, the lib dynamic field is the selector.
This one.
Exactly. So here we are injecting in the constructor the form group directive, which is not a service, but in Angular, the dependency injection works in a way that you can get references to parent directives and components by injecting them to their child in the child component. Mm-hmm. So the code in the on init says, like, this form group directive control get. So it is a reference to the form group from the dynamic form component, if I guess it correctly. So my question would be, like, how does Angular figure out to get that reference?
Well, all I'm passing in is the name, and then it's going. Because I wrote this like 2 years ago, Han. So
if you go to dynamic form component, so the component underneath this one. So my guess is obviously that you got a reference from the form group, because there you register all the controls. So the names of the control are all registered in the form instance from this component. So then inside this component, you're using the dynamic field component dynamically. And there you somehow got that's my guess, that you got a reference to the form group, which you store here. And I'm just wondering, because I never seen a injection like this before. So I was wondering, like you mentioned before, there are really some really strange behaviors or some really wondrous behavior in Angular. So we're just wondering, like, how Angular can figure out in a child component to get a form from the parent component. So I was just wondering about that.
Well, yeah, this is really interesting. And I want to talk about this for a minute, because there was a course that I took, and that's actually my next, because we've been doing the Angular training, the architect training for a while, and I'm going to make another course, another premium course, which is advanced DOM manipulation, because I think it's cool. And I really like to teach stuff that I think is really cool. So the way that because I don't know if you know my daughter teaches with me, and she's dyslexic, right? Which really actually gave us, threw us for a loop, because I was teaching her Angular. I was teaching her HTML and CSS, and it was super easy for her. But when I started teaching her Angular, it all like went horribly wrong. And it was because she was dyslexic and she couldn't see. So I like to, sorry, it's getting late and I didn't get much sleep last night, so I lose my train of thought. Okay, so advanced DOM manipulation. I actually had kind of an epiphany, and I think it was when I was struggling with this code exactly that you're asking about, that, you know, and sometimes I'm a goofball, y'all just bear with me, but so I'm gonna show you how goofball I am, don't laugh. Basically, what I realized, and if you remember jQuery, right? If you just, I try to like to take it back to the simplest thing. If you almost, this is silly, but y'all are not going to forget this, right? Imagine that I'm like a little person in the middle of an Angular DOM, right? I'm in the DOM, and I'm in a component in the middle of the page. And imagine like I'm a little guy, and I'm going to like stick my head out of the page and look around, right? And this was, there's a point to this, I swear. Okay, not even Angular. With jQuery, we could actually kind of spy on anything in the, like we could do, what is it? Get element by ID, get element by, you know what I'm talking about? Get element by tag or whatever. Like we could do that. We could get information from the other thing, even without Angular, right? Even if it's not even an Angular component, there's so much. And if you get into like view child, view content children, what is it? View, like, you know what I'm talking, I don't even remember what it's called because it's getting late here, but it is so, like we have the tools even before Angular to like spy on something around us. And so that's where I kind of went down this path, is like, how can I, because remember, and this is another thing that I see so much, where developers are writing so much code that they don't need. And this is my thing where, you know, I've had arguments with, and I had an argument with Uri Goldstein when I was learning GraphQL and Apollo. Don't even get me started on GraphQL and Apollo. I'll nerd out we'll be here all night. I had just learned NGRX, and then I was trying to learn Apollo, and like, and what he said to me was like, I said, well, I want to do it like this, right? And he said, well, you can, but you're writing a bunch of code that you don't need. And that's what I see over and over again, that they're writing a bunch of code that they don't need. So with the advanced DOM manipulation, with the little dude with his head like peeking out, right? That this is where I see, this is like, it's a code smell. It just like, it makes my eye twitch whenever I come across a team. And I have many times I've seen teams that are writing big, because the components they just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they grow and they get more complicated, and they start, especially if teams are stressed and they've got deadlines and they're like, tech debt is just like drowning, right? Then what happens is these massive big components, you end up with like, you're passing like 15 inputs and outputs per component. And that is like, stop, right? Don't do that. And that's where I want to, that's what kind of made me go down this road, is like, I might not need to pass, like maybe I'm writing more code if I'm passing all this stuff back and forth. And that kind of thinking is what led me to the form value directive, the form control directive. It's not like these little obscure things that you find, because we don't, and there's so much stuff. There's like, Angular seems so intimidating because there's so many things out there that, like, it's like RxJS, right? When I learned RxJS, you know, there's like 150 at least RxJS operators, but you really only need, like, everybody has like their favorite 3, you know, and that's all. Like, I learned like 5, and then there's some that I've never used ever. And I think most of Angular is like that. Like if you, especially if you are lucky enough to work on a team and work in an environment where you can slow down and take the time to research this stuff. Otherwise, like if you're just like, if you've got somebody cracking the whip and you're just running as fast as you can and you're stressed, then you're just going to slap it together. And you're not going to take the time to like, you know, make it beautiful. But if you do, or if you're trying to make it beautiful and you just don't know how to do the syntax, then ping me or another GDE for help, because this is where you find really cool stuff. And this is when you find these little things like I love this stuff. I'll nerd out over this all day. I love it.
But I think it's really interesting because I do know that you can access the host component from another component via dependency injection. That's really cool, a really cool feature, because this way you can actually separate some smaller feature components inside the component. So my estimation here is that the way that injection tree works in Angular is that it's sort of like recursively parses the component tree upwards and try to find the nearest form group direct. That's my estimation, because I will definitely try it out to put it like nested twice, you know, and put two different form groups and see how the reference works. But this is my estimation how it probably got the reference.
I think
I like you. We should be friends, because your brain works like now I want to play with it, you know. You're probably a nerd like me. You stay up late past your bedtime coding.
Nerd, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the dynamic form component template, so I think that's it, Han. Bonnie, would you mind sharing your screen again? Is that okay?
I would be happy to.
And if you open up the dynamic form template HTML, I have a feeling there'll be a form group directive in there.
This one?
Yes, that's my estimation. That's my guess. Yeah.
So this is because the form group directive provides itself within the dependency injection tree, which is why you can then inject it in the container.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So if you look at the source code of the form group, I'll post that here actually because I have the link. So I've just posted a link. If you could open that up, Bonnie, that would be really great. And then we'll see that will close the loop hopefully, and explain how the dependency
source code investigation. I love it.
Yeah.
He asked, "How does it work?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I got you this far."
Hey, can do without the code. Okay, so line 22, you've got this little provider constant, and so we're essentially saying provide, which is sort of the key for the thing you're providing, like the token, and then line 24 says use existing forward ref to the form directive component. And if you scroll down a little bit to the directive decorator on line 50, so then we're setting the providers to be what was specified above. So essentially we're saying allow people to inject, essentially saying whenever this directive is used, it's going to register itself in the dependency tree so it can be injected later. And so so Bonnie's leveraged that to be able to like get a reference to the form group, which obviously has a reference to the control. I think that's right. Is that right?
It's spot on. It's excellent research, Max. You did it in such a short time. Well done.
So basically, whenever I see this pattern in the Angular source code, I know that I can get an access to this reference via dependency injection, because this will be really useful for all sorts of things, I guess.
Yeah.
For other directives as well.
Yeah, and that pattern, you'll also need that if you're doing the. I think Bonnie posted a link to the control value accessor.
Yes.
You'll be using providers that's how you get if you're writing a custom control, that's how you sort of connect that custom control to material and then like build a bridge between the two so material understands your control basically. So it's kind of a weird thing, but once you get it, it's really, really, really useful.
And I also want you to remember when you're writing your own code, Han's asking me about this and I'm like, I don't remember, I don't even know. It's like, I don't know all of this, but I don't expect you to know this. I don't want you to try to remember all of this. I just want you to think when you're writing your code, this is not elegant. Let me go look, right? Because it's not about remembering everything. I don't remember half of what I've done. Like half the code I wrote, like I don't even remember what it does, right? But it's just, I just want you to remember, like if you're writing a whole bunch of code, especially when you're talking about going back and forth between like two components communicating with each other, if you're just writing too much code, that's when you just have to slow down and take a step back and go look for something like this. Or ask me, or ask another GDE, or ask Max or Han or Tom or anybody, or just ask anybody. Because I really think that the magic for me starts to happen when I go, you know what? I don't like this code that I'm writing and I'm not satisfied with it. And then some of us, like when I was younger, I didn't have that luxury. I was just trying to keep my job. I didn't know what I was doing. But, you know, hopefully we slow down and then we can write more beautiful code.
That's great.
I think it's intimidating though sometimes. So don't be intimidated. That's what I want you to take away from this.
Bonnie, when's your architect training? Just wondering what kind of course that is, what format does it take? Is it like a couple of days or?
It is, yeah. So I struggled a lot with that. Samantha and I actually spent a month building the course, and we started with like all the stuff that you have to know about Angular, and we were like trimming it down because I wanted to make it like I really, when I teach, I don't want to teach everything there is to teach, right? Because I just don't want to fry people's brains. I want to actually see what people care about. Like if I'm working with you, I want to say, instead of saying like, shut up and I'm going to teach you everything, I want to say, tell me what you want to learn about, right? Because somebody told me a long time ago, if you really want to help someone, rather than telling them what they need to hear, ask them what they need, ask them what they need help with. And so we do, so the architect, we actually have our third group that starts Monday, Monday the 9th, is it? Yeah, Monday the 19th, October 19th. And we do, every Tuesday morning, I do an hour-long content session. And it's 4 weeks. And then that's not the fun part. The fun part is on Thursdays when we have office hours. And then people come in face to face. We have an office hours in the morning and another one in the afternoon. So people can and everything is recorded. Everything is available for replay. And there's an activity feed so you can ask questions. But it's really very interactive. The course was, because that was the thing, like I don't have time. You don't have time for me to teach everything there is to teach. Like it would take me a year to create that course, and there's so much out there. So I really wanted to focus kind of the most bang for your buck was what I was looking for. Like, let's go with the biggest things that I'm teaching over and over and over again that I see these big teams struggling with. And I also talked quite a bit with Igor when I was creating this, and I was asking Igor and like, Stephen, like what are the biggest, because a lot of companies, the companies that have a lot of money, go straight to the Angular team for help, right? And they get help. And also a lot of companies, I think within Angular, not even the ones that have money, but the ones within Angular or within Google, what they said, what Stephen and Igor said, I said, what is because I'm like, I wanted to tackle all of the things that companies are struggling with. And I know in my own experience that I've seen like the same thing over and over again, like they're too big. They're these massive apps, right? And I asked them, what is the biggest thing? Because I would like want to add it to my course, like don't do this. I'm like having all these best practices and kind of streamline them for architects. And I asked them, what is the biggest thing that you see people, or like things that you see people struggling with, that people come to you and ask you for help? What do they ask you for help with? And they were like, easy. The apps are massive. They're too big. They're making big apps. And so that is the biggest problem. And especially when they're enterprise and they're like, 100,000 lines of code, like this is the stuff that people are really struggling with. And really the code works, but it's the more you build, the slower it gets. That's what we're finding. The bigger it gets, the slower it gets. And then they get stuck and like, they're just drowning under this big, massive thing. And it's a problem. And so really the course is like how to not do that, or how to fix it if you're going down that road, and and if you're, I see so much where I come into a team, maybe usually teams are between 3 and 5, 6 people, right? If you have 5 senior developers on a team together, and they're all smart, they all have good work ethic, they're all great developers. But what I see that really these people have problems is number one, they're not talking enough to each other. They're not like, everybody's task oriented. Everybody's keeping their head down and everybody's problem solving every day, because that's what we do, right? We're troubleshooting and we're getting this stuff working. But what they need is adult supervision. What they need, every team that's writing Angular should have an architect. And the problem that I see, and this is what we talk about actually specifically, and some of the stuff actually that Han was talking about, we talk about like, hey, what do you do with your junior developers and how do you get everybody, it's like herding ducks, right? Or herding cats, we call it. How do you get everybody going the same way? What I struggle with, and a lot of people struggle with, because I feel like the most successful architects are really pushy, arrogant, I don't like that. I'm not pushy. Like, I don't want to, talk over people in a meeting and tell people just like, but so if you're not that kind of person, if you're not pushy and overbearing, then how do you get all of everybody to listen to you, right? That's challenging. And that's been really challenging for me because I'm a really nice person and I'm a girl and I'm really laid back. But I have had to come in and be an architect, because if somebody's paying me to come in and get then I have to get all these 5 developers to do it right. And they're all arguing and it's just, and so a lot of that experience, like how do we work through that and how do we support that? If you have a senior developer who's like really trying to get it all right, then how do you get the whole team cohesively to work together and solve those problems? That's what we talk about. And lots of office hours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have a question before we wrap up? I think we certainly got our no money's worth from Bonnie here. I think she's probably quite knackered.
I love this. I miss people. I really like people, and I miss the conferences. I don't want to go back to the conferences anytime soon because my son's calling me. I'm busy. I don't want to, because I don't think it's worth it with COVID, right? We should like be cautious and wait until that runs its course. But I miss people. I like people, so I love this format.
That's cool. No other questions, anybody? All right. Well, I think
when's next meetup?
Yeah, Han, we'd love to have you again, and Bonnie, if you fancy joining us, you can even just pop in and visit.
Also, if we've got any budding speakers in this group, I know we're always asking.
Yes.
Are you guys one of those people that's okay with people that don't have a lot of experience?
Oh, for sure. But what we like most of all is people who present an idea and actually turn it into a discussion where we evolve and actually come up with something better. Not in a criticizing way, but in an actual collaborative way. I think those kind of meetups can be awesome if everybody stays on the case.
Yeah. It was really scary for me when I first started. It was okay for me when I was teaching beginners. Like I was doing free workshops for girls back in Houston and I was teaching beginners and that was fine. But when I started like actually like talking to my peers, I was terrified. I was like, well, what happens if I show them the code and then they go, that's stupid? And I was just, well, nobody did that. I mean, nobody would do that. Or sometimes if like people would show me stuff that I didn't even know. And I'm like, wow, I learned something cool. Like I'm teaching, but I'm learning. It's great. Oh, there's one more thing, because you said you want me to come back, and I'm actually working on a talk with Sonder Alias, who's a really cool guy. He's actually been an Angular contributor for a long time, and he's my friend. He's here in the Netherlands. I was talking to him. I wanted to do a talk with him because he said he misses traveling, and I was like, we should do a talk together. I want to talk to him about RxJS because he does a lot of RxJS reactive programming. He actually wrote Scully. You might have heard of Scully. He's the guy that wrote Scully. And we were talking about just, you know, RxJS and synchronous versus asynchronous. And he started talking to me about like how JavaScript is like a single threaded and how it works. Like it's synchronous, but it's not synchronous, or it's asynchronous and it's synchronous. And I was getting confused and I started arguing with him. And then he went on the console log and started showing me stuff. And I realized after how many years I've been an Angular or a JavaScript developer, I was completely confused. This was like 2 weeks ago, you guys. I was completely confused about what he was saying. And I didn't know I was confused. And I thought he was confused, except he's like crazy, wicked smart. And so this thing is like, there's a couple of talks about it that with Jake Archibald and this guy named Philip at a JS Conf a long time ago. We were talking about the JavaScript event loop and how it works with the call stack and the task queue and like how those work together. And I felt like I understood that very well, and I did not. I did not understand. I was confused, and my brain just melted. Sonder started showing me exactly how it works, and I was really confused. And so I took that thing that we were, because I saw the talks and I felt like I knew, but I didn't know. Sonder and I are making a talk, and we actually got Samantha, who's my daughter, who does all the graphics and all that stuff. So we're taking this and we're making it visual to see like actually what's going on under the hood with JavaScript V8, because Sonder said this is something that a lot of people are confused about. It's very confusing, even for people who have been doing JavaScript for years, because we don't really need to know how it works under the hood. But guess what? Sometimes when especially when we've got a lot of reactive programming and we've got moving parts and things are getting more and more complicated, we write our own bugs and we can't figure out what's wrong with it, because we did that ourselves. Because when he started showing me the console log with a set timeout and he did a while loop, and I was like super confused. Anyway, so we're doing that talk, and when it's ready, I'll ping you, Tom, and we'll come back. It might be another month or two.
Absolutely fantastic. You are so welcome, Bonnie. That's really good. Thank you.
And I'll bring Sonder with me. You guys will love him. He's really cool.
Oh yeah, more the merrier. And
Awesome.
Han, you've been so talkative. You should come and present as well.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
It's all right. You're not under pressure. Just come along and watch and listen. It's everybody's welcome. Yeah, I think this might be a convenient point to wrap up. Is everybody cool with that? Unless you've got some burning platforms or questions.
I just want to throw in a little comment for Han, because I think that it would be, because you need some inspiration, right? Just encouraging you to do what Tom said. I think that it would be really cool if you took this dynamic form and extend it to add the autocomplete, and then come back and show us how you did that and how that worked. I think that would be really cool, because I think a lot of other people would want to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge accepted.
And you probably need to do it for your client anyway, so you'll get paid for it. And then it's like 2 birds with 1 stone. And if you do, then I'll also put you on ngHouston. And you have to be careful, because I book guests for both of those shows. So if you go on ngHouston and you do a good job, you're probably going to get pulled up to Angular Air. And then you can be nervous, right? You shouldn't even be nervous in these little tiny meetups. But you go to Angular Air, it's okay to be nervous, because then you're the big shot. I'm just kidding. It's the same thing. It's just another meetup. It's fine.
Let's start with small steps.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. I really like talking to you guys. This is probably the longest meetup, because I'm just used to it being like, in and out quickly. But I really like getting to actually hang out with you guys and talk through this stuff. This was really fun.
And
thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
We really
Thanks a lot.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much.
Absolutely. Don't be strangers. Reach out to me anytime. I would love to keep in touch with all of you. And Tom, I absolutely would love to come back.
Oh.
Would that be via Angular Nation or?
I'm still on Twitter, but I really stay away from Twitter these days, because Twitter stresses
me
me out more. So I'm always on Angular Nation. I check it at least. I love, because that's my people, right? Everybody's people are just more friendly on Angular Nation. And we don't talk about anything but Angular. So, and people are so nice. I feel a lot more comfortable on Angular Nation. So it's very easy to reach out to me. You can send me a direct message, ask me a question. I will probably help you someday. I mean, if we end up with 100,000 people, I can't answer everybody, but there's only like 12 of you. So
actually, the truth is, when you log in, she pings you first. So that's certainly what happened to me.
Yeah, because I knew. Yeah, because I try, because I was already talking to you on Slack, and I was like, hey, Tom. Yeah, it's getting hard to keep up, but yeah, it's just, I feel more comfortable there, because I feel like it's more cozy.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming. I think that was a really good talk. And thank you to everybody who's turned up as well. It's a good turnout. And thanks for staying on for this long chat afterwards. Thanks. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Cheers, Bon. See ya.
That was fun. Have a good one. Thank you so much again for inviting me. This was
You're
really
so
fun.
welcome. Really, this is the kind of collaboration I've always been craving. Thank you.
I love it. Yeah, anytime.
All right.
Yeah,
Hey, did I tell you, Tom, we have community office hours tomorrow night around this same time? Tomorrow night, right now, tomorrow night is community office hours with the NGXS core team on Angular Nation. And then I think Sam Julien is coming on Friday night after Angular Air.
Goodness me. Right. Well, I'll have to see if I can log in and do some of that. Thank you.
Yeah, you should join us if you have time. All right. It was really nice meeting both of you. Nice to meet you, Max. Don't be a stranger. We'll see you around.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.